Hey guys, you ever thought about making your own podcast? Well, if you want a platform to start it off, just go to Anchor FM. It's the easiest way to make a podcast.
For one, it's free, and there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer.
Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcasts with no minimum listenership.
Guys, like I said, it's the easiest thing you can ever do to start off your own podcast. Free, you can make money off of it, and it is easy to use. It is coming from me, a guy who knows almost nothing about technology or how to use computers. So guys, all you got to do is go to Anchor FM, you just sign up, and you start up your own podcast. You can get your own logo and everything. On this episode of Three Bros Sports Podcast, the podcast of three college students who could just talk about sports forever, we're going over the NFL has now been coming out with some rumors saying that Colin Kaepernick has a mystery team that's looking to sign him right now. There's a lot of teams out there that could easily use a backup or possibly a starter. We're going to be giving our takes on who that team may be. Also, the MLB draft just went down a few nights ago. I have a personal take for the teams that decided to botch their pick and pick a guy that wasn't going to be drafted until, let's just say, the 5th round. But we also got a special guest coming on for you today. We have not just one, but two. We got Saad Yousuf, a writer for the Athletic Dallas-Fort Worth, covering the Dallas Mavericks. He's coming on to talk about Luka Doncic, how amazing of a season he's had so far. Also, his starting five lineup, if he meshed up all of his favorite teams from the Mavericks era. Also, we got Matt Brooks, a reporter for the Nets Daily from SB Nation, my favorite SB Nation account as of right now since Sacktown Royalty was removed from the website. Long story about it, don't want to get into it. We're going over with him way too many Sacramento Kings references. I'll give you that right now. So if you're not a Sacramento Kings fan or if you're tired of us talking about that, you could skip ahead a couple parts if you want. Also, why we love Iman Shumpert. Also, his thoughts on Jacques Vaughn, the next coach for the Nets, and much, much more. But first,
this is Jay Stevens of the Jay Stevens Podcast, and you're listening to Three Bros Sports. But first,
shut up and sit down.
And welcome back to another Three Bros Sports Podcast, the podcast of three college students who could just talk about sports forever. I'm Connor.
I'm Tarik.
I'm Rick.
As you can tell, there was a different name. Before I get into Rick's name, Calvin was unable to join us today. We had some schedule conflicts as we had to record this on Friday. It's a day where Calvin works. Calvin will be on with us next week, so don't you fear for all the people who miss Calvin and all of his hockey takes and the jersey ideas. Tarik's joining us for today, as you could tell with his enthusiasm. He is hyped up to be here today. Am I right?
That's completely correct. I also went through my middle school flashback where my voice is cracking again. That's not true. I really do appreciate being here. I did not know we had a Rick with us, so that actually confuses me, and I'd like to speak to my lawyer about that.
Yeah, because on our screen that we're recording with, I see a Brett. Now, who's Rick?
Now, I mean, for our past listeners, you know that I use a different name for every podcast, but Connor, a wise man once said, I'm Rick James. So we'll use it. I woke up feeling dangerous. The audience doesn't have to worry. I edit these. I'll add my little censor there, but we woke up feeling dangerous. I missed the last episode, so I'm back. I know the audience missed my random names, and if you haven't seen that Dave Chappelle skit, you're missing out.
You know what? Yes, you are, to all the fans out there who have not heard about that. And now we're getting closer and closer to live sports coming back, especially with the NBA. There's just been a lot of reports going around. And I think the biggest one off the bat has to be about Colin Kaepernick now with the recent events that's been going on throughout the country of the NFL has now came out saying we were wrong to have been against players peacefully protesting, taking a knee, and that we will now support it. The question had been going around about Colin Kaepernick he was the one who started it. He was the one giving the most flack. Teams didn't want him for the media controversy. Pete Carroll recently came out saying it was one of the biggest mistakes he made, not signing him, as the Seahawks were the last team he had a workout with. Now, there's been some rumors that Carroll started saying that there's a mystery team interested in getting Kaepernick. Now,
as me and Tarik are diehard 49ers fans, I think everybody has their vast opinion on Colin Kaepernick. And personally, I didn't feel as if in 2016 he was good enough to be a starter, and that there were some backups that were better than him. And I could understand a team's perspective of, look, there's just a whole media controversy, and Kaepernick, he's not even going to be our franchise player. It just seems a little tough to go after him. Now with things lightening up and he's looking more as a leader for this protesting, what mystery team is really going after him right now?
I mean, there's so many, it's really interesting to think about because it's basically at this point, it can be 30 other teams. I mean, I'm going to rule out San Francisco and Seattle. I mean, Seattle wouldn't go out and be like, well, there's a bunch of mystery teams, but guess what? One of them is us. That would not be the case. It's just so interesting to wrap your head around. I'll bring up one team here, the Los Angeles Rams. And now, we mentioned this off air, and I kind of spoke of their name. But and I know, Connor, you mentioned they have Blake Bortles. But think about that. They have Blake Bortles. That really resides well with Rams fans. Oh, my gosh, we have Blake Bortles. Do back up Jared Goff.
Hey, one interesting fun fact about Bortles. He has a higher passer rating in the playoffs than Tom Brady. So that's telling you something right there.
Wow.
Don't forget about it.
Wow. And if you multiply Blake Bortles' playoff appearances by about 15, it evens up as well. But anyway, with Blake Bortles, and I mean, the other reason why they might look at signing Kaepernick is because we look at where the Rams have been put in a situation where they could possibly be the worst team in the NFC West. I mean, let's be fair, the Arizona Cardinals with DeAndre Hopkins and Isaiah Simmons, they're looking pretty good in that West, and the Rams need something to kind of not only boost themselves on the field, but off the field. They might be looking at putting some new fans in that stadium. And I mean, you got the big media market out there. It would, I think, be a decent, not a terrible move for the Rams if they wanted to add Colin Kaepernick there. And remember, with all these teams that sign Kaepernick, he can still be used in a complementary facet, even as a backup. You remember with the 49ers back in 2012, even 2011, when Alex Smith was the starter and they used him in certain packages as a wide receiver, the Wildcat. And then different kind of things where he was still involved. And I could see the Rams doing that with their with the way they run their offense. So there's one team right there.
I mean, definitely could be a possibility. It just seems weird because Goff, it's true. He didn't have a great season when it came to wins and losses. He didn't look like a true leader out there, but he was tied for first in most passing attempts, third out of all quarterbacks in passing yards with 4,600. It's like those numbers will still solidify he can still throw it. Now, it's tough when you're planning to be having Gurley out there, and it just never came to fruition with his health throughout the entire year. So I'm curious, because it is tough for me to say that the Rams are bad now. Sean McVay is an offensive genius. I don't think there's any other way to hide that. Their defense should be still one of the better defenses in the NFL. I think they had a small fall off last year. It was a little tough with all the extra talent meshed in, but you give them a training camp or whatever you're going to call as a training camp, and they could mesh back. The NFC West is such a tough division. It's really hard for me to say who'd be in dead last, because I could make the argument for the Cardinals being last, going 8-8.
Yeah, you could. I will say, I mean, the Rams, I don't think are a bad team. I will say that I look at how much talent they've lost. And listen, any team with Aaron Donald on defense still racking up for lack of a better word, just swagging it out there. It's always going to be, at the very least, a decent team. And the Rams will be a decent team. They still have weapons out there, and they're still going to be an okay team. It's just it's a case of, are they and they could finish in front of the Cardinals easily, especially if one of those two teams gets hit by injuries. But the thing is that I don't see either one of them being explosive enough to take over the top two teams in the division, the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers. They just don't have the depth, really, especially the Rams. You see a few key players, but they really don't have that depth, and that's why they lost to those key games down the stretch. That depth really cost them in games like in Pittsburgh and in San Francisco. So that's what I see when I look at the Rams. But other spots for Kaepernick, though, one that I mentioned might be the most likely from an on-the-field perspective would be the New England Patriots. Because right now,
pass.
You think pass? Well, here let me explain before you. I know you're going to disagree with that, but I will say this: from an on-the-field standpoint, it might make sense because you're ready to start Jared Stidham. Is that how you pronounce it, Stidham?
Yeah, whatever you want.
Yeah, whatever I want, right? He's just like, yeah, whatever it is. And Brian Hoyer. I mean, listen, Connor, we know Brian Hoyer. We saw Brian Hoyer.
The 2017 MVP for the 49ers, when I was out at Levi Stadium with you, screaming to all the fans after his awful game.
Not many people were there, Connor.
Not many, but still, I was screaming out to them that he will be the 2017 MVP.
You were.
I don't appreciate the disrespect put on him. Rick, you got to back me up on this one. Rick, I need some help here.
I can't really help you there with Brian Hoyer. I mean, we've seen how that's worked out. He's had plenty of opportunities, and it's never ended pretty.
Hey, you remember that one preseason game with Brian Hoyer?
He let the Browns go 7-9 on.
Hey, if anyone,
and you know who the offensive coordinator was? It was Kyle Shanahan.
If anyone can pull off being bald, it's Brian Hoyer, that's for sure. But if we're talking about NFC West teams, I mean, an interesting team might even be the Seahawks. I mean, they've had talks with Kaepernick in the past. Pete Carroll has come out recently with everything that's going on, saying that, you know, he regretted not signing Kaepernick. And they've shown in the past that they're willing to bring in players with controversial pasts. I mean, this isn't really controversial. If anything, it would look better for a team to sign Kaepernick now than it did a couple years ago when everyone was upset with disrespecting the flag and that argument. But, you know, they brought in Josh Gordon. You know, Russell Wilson's been an advocate for Antonio Brown. So the Seahawks could be another team that would be in the running. But I also read an article that was put out about 5 teams he could go to, and I kind of would be interested to hear your guys' thoughts on this. What about the Titans? I mean, they just got Ryan Tannehill. You know, he played well last year.
You don't need any better than Tannehill.
He did really good handing the ball off to Derrick Henry. Don't get me wrong, but if something were to happen, I'm not even sure who Tennessee's backup is right now. I mean, they don't have
Logan Woodside.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure who that.
And the fact that you've never heard of him,
I'm not sure who that is. Yes, so that would be a good place to get Kaepernick. Because look, I mean, look at Cam Newton right now. I mean, he can't even find a starting job right now. The starting jobs are slim right now. I mean, you could make an argument for Jacksonville, you know, maybe just because of Minshew's lack of experience, but you know, it's going to be tough for Kaepernick to find a place where he can go in and start day one. So I think the Titans could be a good place. But what do you guys think about that?
Connor, you go first. I'm going to give myself time to think about it.
The Titans are definitely an interesting situation because a quarterback out in Tennessee, they don't have to do much. They really don't. It's you're handing off to Henry, and it's going to be like 15-yard completions. That's really all you're looking for. You're not looking for a gunslinger. I think Ryan Tannehill is a perfect field manager for them. Kaepernick could be interesting as he adds a different flair, but is that offense really built to have a guy like him around there? Now, I know, Brett, you're asking us for your feedbacks on it, but I wanted to at least ask you because of the whole situation that's gone around in Minneapolis, there's been a lot of people saying, you know what, the Vikings need to go get Kaepernick. Now, I know you're asking us about how the Titans are, but would the Vikings be a better possibility than the Titans?
I mean, the Vikings could certainly be a possibility. I mean, our backup right now is Sean Mannion. I mean,
guess who the third stringer is, by the way? Jake Browning.
Yeah, Jake Browning. I couldn't think of his name. Yeah, it used to be a guy.
Wait, and Jake Browning's a Folsom product. Tarik, we broadcasted one of his games, actually.
Yeah, I just want to mention that real quick. Jake Browning went to a nearby high school out in Northern California that we live by out in Roseville. He came to Wood Creek and I think threw, am I right, 8 touchdowns in one game? By the third quarter.
He obliterated us, and us as broadcasters had to stand there and be like, it's happening again. Crap. Okay.
I don't know too much about Browning. I know that he was undrafted, and we signed him for a pretty big check for an undrafted free agent. So, they do have some confidence there. But we saw Sean Mannion come in the game and start in Week 17 last season, and it was rough. I mean, if anything was to happen to Kirk Cousins, I mean, luckily he's been able to avoid injuries for most of his career. But
you like that?
I do like that. I mean, I like that better than Sean Mannion having to start more than one game for us. That's for sure. So I think, like you mentioned, with Minneapolis being the center of where everything started, it makes sense for them to sign them. I mean, I wouldn't be upset, certainly, but I'm not sure that he would get much playing time.
Yeah, I mean, could I throw out one more name or one more team?
Go for it.
Real quick. I like the Carolina Panthers. The more I look into them, I mean, they just signed Teddy Bridgewater. So realistically, unless Bridgewater struggles, because let's be fair, he hasn't been a full-time starting QB in a while, Kaepernick would probably be the backup in this situation. And you look at the other quarterbacks, you've got Will Grier and Philip Walker. And Walker, now, he did a great job in the XFL, was probably their best player, but you're taking a big risk counting on someone from the XFL to be successful in the NFL. Plus, you look at the fact that Panthers ownership has got David Tepper, who has been called the most, and this is true, the most woke owner in the NFL. Think of that what you will. And the Panthers also have Eric Reed, former 49ers safety, who, if you may remember, was side by side with Kaepernick in these protests. So there might be a little urgency from that side to get him down into North Carolina. So it's obviously geographically maybe not the greatest fit, but the team-wise, I could see it happening there too.
Yeah, the opportunities are endless. We could go on about that forever. Of every single team, you can easily make an argument. Well, you could use somebody with a more mobile type of play, but who knows, honestly, until it happens, because there was always the rumors about it possibly going on, and then nothing ever happened. His workout last season that went really poorly for a PR standpoint. There's a lot that we could always go over, but I want to keep things rolling around throughout all three major sports. And I think going into the MLB, we have to go over the draft, as there was a trend going on, and there was only one, maybe two teams in particular that I really had a small bone to pick with. And I know one may seem a little biased just because of, I'm maybe not the world's biggest New England sports fan, but the Boston Red Sox had the 17th overall pick going into this year's draft. 17th. And they decided to pick Nick York. He's a second baseman from Archbishop Mitty, and that's in the Northern California area. So he's more of a local product.
San Jose.
In the San Jose area. I want to point out, so he's drafted 17th overall, but ranked 139th. Now, people would ask, why are they doing that? Well, the reason why you would do such a thing is because you can try to lowball that player and give him a ridiculously low contract that they will refuse in order for that team to get another first-round pick to next year's draft, and to also avoid having to pay a big signing bonus right now when teams are not getting their profits, because you know how owners are. They need to either get 100% of the profits or they're not going to play a single game. As their negotiations are going on forever, I could talk about that at a later date. But Tarik, I know Brett is our big baseball analysis, but I know he may want to just sit out on this one because he has a lot to say, and we have limited time here.
Oh yeah, I could go all day about this.
If you were given out, I know I don't want to do that to you right now. If you had to go off a couple winners and losers throughout this draft, who would you be going with in particular?
So you want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it, buddy.
All right. Well, first loser is Rob Manfred because he's Rob Manfred.
Yeah,
and
that's our point.
I mean, taking that lonely podium, going, "Hi, everybody! You guys enjoying no baseball? Boo!" I mean, come on, he's the biggest loser of them all. Now, and I guess when I look at winners like in the draft, I kind of like what the Rays did at number 24. The guy's name's pretty cool too, Nick Bitsko. You've got a guy there at 24 who really honestly was projected, as I'm looking here on the MLB draft tracker, at 14. I mean, you got right here a pitcher at 6'4", 225 pounds at a high school Central Bucks High School in Pennsylvania, and put on a little tape from him. He looks pretty impressive. And I mean, you know what the Rays can do with pitchers. I mean, we're talking David Price, we're talking Blake Snell. It's just like the names go on and on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like that pick. It's a good value pick there out there in Tampa Bay. And again, I'm going to sound, kind of like I'm tooting my own horn here, but I'll go with the Oakland A's. I like what they did.
I did too. Yeah.
Yeah, I like at 26 taking Tyler Soderstrom, who is a local guy from out here, Turlock High School, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Roseville, maybe about 45 minutes, an hour south of Sacramento. You got a left-handed hitting catcher, and those are not terribly common nowadays. And the scouts are saying, good size. He's got a great swing. He's a fine defender, and he has a chance of being the best hitting catcher, and maybe one of the best hitters, just natural hitters in baseball in about 5 years. And that I think is pretty exciting. Also considering he's a high school prospect, and you know how the A's feel about service time and age because there's a ticking clock when it comes to Oakland. So the Red Sox have to be. I mean, I would say now the Red Sox
skipping another winner that may have been in the AL West. That
okay, fine.
One of the people here could have been crying tears of joy.
Reed Detmers, yay! Yeah,
Louisville product, the lefty southpaw, going over to the Angels. Out of all pitching prospects that I've watched, Detmers seemed the most MLB ready. Now he's not going to beat you with the velocity; he's going to beat you with command. His control is far none. He has a really solid plethora of pitches to use. I really loved what I saw out of him, and I'm just so grateful the Angels did not decide to just go after another shortstop or outfielder like they do every single year for no reason, when those two positions are literally the team's biggest strengths. Never made sense, but I at least had to. I want to hear Tarik just say the Angels were a winner on it. But go ahead. Who do you got as your loser?
Yeah, losers. I mean, I'll go with the Angels as a winner. I'll say that. It's okay. I can say that and not feel too bad. Anyway, so for a second I thought when I first took a look at this prospect, I thought it said Tucker Carlson. I could not believe the TV announcer from Fox News was able to also play baseball, and I was actually about to be really impressed. But no, it's actually Carson Tucker, although it says on here he goes by Cole Tucker. Oh, check that. He's the brother of Cole Tucker. Carson Tucker, now he looks to have the skills of a decent shortstop. I mean, for a first rounder, I mean, obviously you expect a lot out of shortstops defensively and offensively. As a senior high schooler from Mountain Point High School in Arizona, and really, his defensive tools took a leap up this last spring, but before then were just kind of, like to me, he seems more like a second-round pick. Like there seems to be a little more to develop there, and especially with these high school prospects, you have to know for sure, like, okay, these skills are above. All these skills are like above like what we could even imagine an MLB 5-tool player to be. And with him, I look at him and I say he could be easily up with any of these other guys, but there's a little more risk there. And if I'm the Cleveland Indians, I'm really thinking that Francisco Lindor is not going to be around if we're drafting a shortstop in the first round. And also, I think it's a bit of a risk at 23. Not to say it's like what the Red Sox did, because that's just like what in the world are you doing? But I'm not a huge fan of that pick. So I wasn't a big fan of the Giants second round pick either. Casey Schmidt from San Diego State.
Well, I wasn't a fan of the first round pick either. I mean, you're going after another catcher when the DH rule hasn't been approved in 2020.
Yeah,
when you have Posey, you have Joey Bart. It's where's he going? Unless Brandon Belt's being moved and you're going to move Bart to first, I don't see why you would do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's a good point. Although I do think that they will have it approved, and that's the only reason why. And they must be very confident. And if they're not, and if it doesn't end up happening, then that will be another bad pick. But I think it will work out in their favor in that way. But I mean, we talk about two-way players now. Casey Schmidt is a guy who is a power hitting third baseman. And he also worked as a reliever, and he has mentioned that he would like to do both. But here's the thing is that his tools, like he's got a fastball gets up to 94. He's got a splitter. Splitters are illegal nowadays. Splitters, yes, sadly. Oh, how dare they? A splitter from 77 to 80 miles per hour, and he helps miss bats with it. But the thing is, his bat has a lot of raw power that needs to be developed. And the one thing that you fear here is that he's going to focus a lot of that development on his pitching as well. And his main tool that he advertises for, his hitting, is going to suffer as a result. And that, I think, because I don't think this is Shohei Ohtani 2.0, because Ohtani was already somewhat developed when he got to Anaheim. So I don't know. I feel like this is a very, like, where they should have probably gone out and gotten a knee that kind of went for the super project. Like, if he works out, then oh boy. But I don't know. Second round might be a bit of a stretch. I would have gone like 4th or 5th round just because of his upside, but it doesn't seem as solid to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I gave my winners and losers, and basically mine and Tarik's aligned pretty well on a recent Instagram post. 3 Bro Sports TV. You can click the follow button. You can mute us if you really want to, but
don't mute us. Come on.
We'll take the follow
post
right
notifications
now. We're
on.
at that phase. Yeah, if anything, you can turn the post notifications on. That's an easier one to do, and we would be a little bit more happier, as well as there may be a possible giveaway coming up soon. I'm not going to spoil any secrets around here, but you guys may want to follow us on our Instagram page, add us on our Twitter, 3 Bro Sports TV. Find us on Facebook, 3 Bro Sports TV. It's easy, or just 3 Bro Sports. It's going to pop up. You find the podcast, you find everything. Just type 3 Bro Sports. Even on our website that we have completely revamped. Brett and Calvin did some major adjustments because that website was screaming 2004, barely working on AOL, and now it is a fine-looking website. You guys need to check out. All of the writers have their
it looks amazing.
Profile page, their own sub-page. They got everything. The article page looks brand new. We got new color schemes into there. New articles are coming up all the freaking time. What are you doing? Why haven't you checked it out? Why am I having to repeat myself?
Don't make all our hard work go to waste, people.
Yeah, don't make Connor pop a vein. Let's be fair.
I will pop like 5 veins in my head, and thank goodness we're not recording right now because I don't want to scare off all the viewers. But I'm telling you right now, if you don't, someone here is going to get really unhappy. But besides the point, we're going to take just a quick break. When we come back, we got a special guest coming on. We got Saad Yousuf from the Athletic Dallas-Fort Worth and also ESPN Dallas. He's coming on to talk about the Dallas Mavericks and also just going in to the playoffs starting in July. And we are back, just like I said. 3 Bros are always still going to be here. We got a special guest with us today. We got Saad Yousuf, who works for the Athletic Dallas-Fort Worth. Don't know why I already messed that up. And also for ESPN Dallas, all the way since 2015. Mr. Yousuf, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. We always love going over the NBA, especially since it's back, because this podcast primarily is all NBA. And I think we're all getting a little antsy waiting for the season to come back on. Now, since you're covering the Mavericks, and the Mavericks played the last regular season game that actually had fans in attendance, I thought it was so interesting even to know that you were there kind of building up to that night. Like, what was the overall feeling about it? Because I don't think anybody could have imagined like that atmosphere, or even thinking that after that game, that is the last one of the regular season at that time.
Yeah, I mean, going into it for the entire week, the discussion was that, the NBA is preparing to play without fans, and actually the NHL as well. So, we were all like prepared to go into it. For the last couple of weeks, the media was restricted, or I think it was just the last week or week and a half, the media was restricted from the locker room. We were conducting interviews in a room from a distance and things like that. So there were measures being taken. And the big conversation at that point, if you remember, even with when LeBron James was asked about playing without fans, and he was like, "Oh, I'm not playing without fans." And so that was the whole discussion around that time, was what would it be like if fans weren't allowed? Because I think, if the virus and everything had gone the way that it was trending at that time, I think that's the step the NBA was ready to take, was to play games without fans. But I don't think they anticipated their patient zero coming so early in Rudy Gobert. And so I think that's what ultimately led to, obviously, the suspension.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that it was so bizarre to begin with, because the Warriors, I believe it was like the day before, they came out saying we're not playing with any fans, or it's going to be like 1,000 at max. And it was just so weird to hear that throughout the league. It's like, it's just so unprecedented. And especially for the Mavericks, I know you've been covering them on ESPN Dallas since 2015, and this is kind of like the first year that the Mavericks are really back after a couple years of retooling, finding their franchise guy. I think the expectations were getting a lot higher as the Mavericks were just on a tear after Luka came back from his ankle injury. Now, when we're trying to compare the let's just say the 2014-15 team, because that was the last real contender the Mavericks had. I mean, with a lineup of Rondo, Monte Ellis, Chandler Parsons, Dirk, and Tyson Chandler, like that was a scary team going into the playoffs. And I know the whole Rajon Rondo thing never panned out the way it should have been, but what is the real difference of this team versus the previous teams back in the Dirk era?
Well, I mean, the biggest difference is the identity was completely different back then, right? Because like it was all still revolving around Dirk, which is a power forward and just a different kind of game. And whereas like now, you play with Luka and also Kristaps Porzingis. Both of these guys are very they play it's just a whole different system. I mean, when you have a point forward, it changes everything. So I think to have Dirk and to have the game revolve around him was it was a situation where you have a superstar, but it's not a superstar that necessarily is going to handle the ball and things like that. That's why you needed Rondo. That's why they traded for Rondo. Whereas now with Luka, it's a completely different. It's a different ball game because now he's your do-it-all guy. He does everything. So I think that's the biggest difference. And when you look back at that team, they really, ever since they won the title, which by the way was, exactly 9 years ago, ever since the Mavericks won the title, they've been trying to just, put together one-year veteran teams, and it just hasn't worked because, for one reason or another, they just keep coming up short. And that year was, I think, like you said, it was really their last stab. It was trade Jameer Nelson and Jay Crowder and all these guys that they had, which they had a pretty good offense going into December, and trade all of that for Rajon Rondo and see if they can make it work. But yeah, obviously that flamed out pretty badly.
It definitely wasn't pretty, to say the least.
So I just wanted to ask you, there was a recent, Luka Doncic's trainer came out and made a statement that made people think that, Luka Doncic wasn't going to be healthy enough to play. And he clarified his statement saying that, he wasn't game ready, and it's impossible for any of these players to be game ready because they haven't played, any games in so long. So I just wanted to ask, do you think that, not even just Luka, just, the basketball players in general, do you think there's going to be a fall off in the first few games back just because it's been so long since these players have actually been in game action?
Right. I mean, look, actually what the quote that you're talking about with Luka, it was actually a mistranslation that at the Athletic, Tim Cato, our Mavs beat writer, he talked to to Luka's trainer yesterday with the story coming out today about just, what he meant. And what he actually meant was Luka's not in game shape. And then the point that he made was nobody's really in game shape because you can only be in game shape if you're playing games. And so,
right.
You're right. There is going to be a fall off, I think. To predict anything, it would be kind of foolish because this is unprecedented territory. We've never seen anything like this. I know a lot of people like to compare this to like a full off season because of the duration of time, but in reality, like how many restrictions there have been and things like that, it's way different than an off season as well, or your standard off season. So I think, if you're looking for where there's going to be the biggest drop off, I would say it's going to be in the shooting department. I think the conditioning is something that players over the course of the month-long training camp and especially the first few games of that 8-game regular season that they're going to play, I think they'll get the conditioning stuff under control. That's just what I believe. But I think, as far as the shooting, which we know the NBA is such a deep shooting and 3-point league, I think that's where you're going to see the most dramatic drop off across the league. And that's where it's interesting for the Mavericks, because obviously Kristaps Porzingis, the 3-point shot is a big part of his game. They have a guy in Seth Curry who's a sniper, and just to see how those guys' shots are going to be is going to be interesting, because then you might be relying on Luka even more, because Luka is obviously a playmaker who, yes, he has the step back 3-point shot and things like that, but he creates a lot of stuff inside for his teammates as well. So I think that's where the Mavericks do have an advantage, not necessarily over other teams, but just in general. And I think the 3-point shot is going to take the longest to come back, more than anything.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. I mean, you're right. It's hard to compare this to just a regular offseason, because if it was just a regular offseason, players could go into gyms and actually practice if they didn't have courts or facilities at their homes or access to that sort of thing. There's players out there who live in condos and apartments, first-year players that haven't been able to get up shots like, say, a Steph Curry has, who has a court in his backyard. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see that drop off. And then, also the fact that, if they're playing, they know they can't go back home, or possibly they can't see their loved ones, or, there's just all this uncertainty surrounding it. So that mental aspect, I think, is also going to play a big part in, seeing the change in the game.
Yeah, I think so. I think all those things are factors as to why we've seen recently in the last day or two, where players have said that they might not even they might not want to actually go back to Orlando. And I think it'll be interesting to see which players choose not to go to Orlando and continue the season, because it's all really I wouldn't blame any of them, whether you're doing it for safety reasons, whether you're doing it for family reasons, which really ties into the safety stuff as well, especially if you've heard the comments of Joe Ingles from the Utah Jazz and kind of where he's been in all this. And then there's also the factor of some guys just want to keep the attention on the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that. So there's a lot of different factors in play as to why, certain players might opt out of going to Orlando. And, that's all still fluid right now and still in discussions.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see what teams or players are going to do, because players have not come out and said of if they are going, if they aren't. It's just been a lot of maybe there's going to be some, like, you always hear the reports about it, but there's no real certainty as of who. Like the Spurs and the Wizards have been the big teams talking about it. It's really it's confusing until you see it go down. Now, there has been some recent discussions about the NBA allowing rosters to expand to 17 players. I think that also excludes out 2 ways. And now going into this throughout this offseason right now, kind of building back up a training camp, is there anybody that you're seeing the Mavericks may look into as a possible fit to bolster things up?
Nobody I would say significant that's going to be a game changer. I think Ryan Broekhoff is the guy who, they had before. He was kind of a casualty because of the Dwight Powell injury, where they had to bolster the front court. And so they had to go get Willie Cauley-Stein and things like that. And so Ryan Broekhoff is a guy that the Mavericks do like, and he fits their system. He's a good shooter, and he's a guy that the Mavericks could add. And I think what something between the lines by expanding the rosters to 17 players, the NBA is basically saying prepare yourself for a positive test of the for COVID-19, and if there is a positive test, we're just going to keep rolling, and you're going to have to dig deeper into your roster, which is kind of the position you have to have if you're going to look to start a league back up, because starting the league back up was never really a question, in my opinion. It was more about, can you keep it going? Because I think inevitably you are going to run into speed bumps, and the NBA seems prepared to, at least from the NBA side of things, they seem prepared to keep this going. Now, again, the players, the way the players are talking, or the way the reports are coming out recently about the players, I'm not even sure that all the players that we're talking about, that we're anticipating, are even going to make the trip to Orlando, because this morning, actually, just about an hour and a half ago, Chris Haynes of Yahoo, he put out a tweet that said, significant number of players are disappointed that their voice wasn't heard in the decision to restart the season, and then others believe that black players being put in a place to entertain others and ease the league's economic burden among everything that's going on is bad optics. So now that you have players saying that, and then and I believe there was also a follow up with that where somebody said that the players are planning another call tonight with 150 players on the conference call to figure these things out. So all of this stuff is really fluid. Don't really know how this is all going to play out. I still do think that the NBA will restart in Orlando. I just don't know how many players, which players are going to be there, and that's still up in the air.
Yeah, Saad, I have a question for you about the Mavericks as we get down the stretch with 8 more games left in the regular season starting on July 30th. They certainly have had a great season. They're sitting in 7th place right now, but they're only a game and a half behind the Rockets and the Thunder. And I want to ask you, for seeding purposes, when the Mavericks head into the postseason, what team would you most like them to face in the first round?
Well, I mean, I think, if you ask any Mavs fan, the obvious answer there is the Denver Nuggets. And for multiple reasons, except for the fact that Jokic just looks absolutely amazing right now. All of a sudden he lost he lost all that weight and looks really good. But I mean, you talk about that last game that the Mavs played before the stoppage. It was against the Nuggets, and I think they won by like over 10 points, and Boban had 31 points. And I mean, that was a real game. Like, that was not like, some limited the Denver Nuggets were handicapped or anything like that. That was a full game. And so I think, I don't think that the Mavericks are really in a position where, they're trying to make some deep playoff run. And when I say trying, obviously the players are, but I don't think they're equipped to necessarily do that this year. However, you want a matchup that really is a favorable matchup for you and is at a place where, you can gain valuable playoff experience. Right now, they're matched up against the Clippers. And, I'd be shocked if that one went beyond 5 games, maybe 6 games. And the Clippers would take that one pretty handedly because it's a deep roster with a good coach and elite superstars at the top of their game. Whereas, the Denver Nuggets, they have one superstar who is still in his 4th year. He's still kind of building up. And they have a guy that can kind of match up as a big man in Kristaps Porzingis. And then Luka is kind of there to weather the storm the rest of the way. So I think the Nuggets match up really well. That's the team that the Mavericks would like to face. That's the team that I think the Mavericks could take to 6 or 7 games and have a legitimate chance to upset and get to the second round. Whereas right now with the Clippers, I don't really give them that much of a chance to advance to the second round.
Yeah, I mean, when you got Super Kawhi and Paul George, that's a tough squad down there in LA. LA has the 2 best teams. I mean, come on, it's just man. Right. But anyway, that's a different story. Being from Sacramento, we have to get mad at LA. It's part of our blood. But I'll ask one follow-up question here. As we look at the Dallas Mavericks roster, with free agency coming up, obviously, right after the season ends, what sounds like 2 days or something like that, because everything is so compacted together. What player would you like the Mavericks to go after in free agency to really set this team into the next level, to get to the competition, to get into the championship competition, to contention? Unlike this year where it looks more like they're building to be that contender next year. What is that player for the Dallas Mavericks?
Well, I think, the third superstar is something that the Mavericks would love to have, but it's also interesting because the NBA in general has gone from a super team league to a 2 superstar team throughout the league, kind of, whether you look at both of those teams in LA that you pointed to, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden and Russell Westbrook, and the Mavericks have those 2 superstars in place. So I think, when you look at the flavor of the league right now, the Mavericks are right in pace. And one of the biggest things is, and whether it's a frustration for this season or just a fact of the matter is, the Mavericks have a lot of the tools that they need to play well. It's just they need time and experience. They need the playoff experience. Luka just turned 21 years old a couple of months ago. Kristaps Porzingis has never played in a playoff game before, so they need the experience of just time. And then as far as what you need to add, look, I think they need to add a good number 3 weapon, and whether that be someone who is lethal from deep, whether it's someone who just has lockdown defense, whatever it is, they have a few guys on the roster right now that kind of fit that mold, but aren't quite number 3s. They're more number 4, 5s, and bench pieces. I'm talking like, they need for example, they need a better version of a Seth Curry or a better version of a Dorian Finney-Smith to be that number 3. And I think Tim Hardaway Jr. has showed that, he's a good player. But again, he does this often in contract years. We haven't seen this consistently from him. And I do think that he's still better equipped to be, a role player than to be a number 3 player that you rely heavily on.
No, you're right. I mean, we can always look back to Hardaway's time with the Hawks after with the Knicks, then going right back over to the Knicks. It's always been either he's completely on fire or he's not. It's kind of like a Jeff Green, but at shooting guard. But before I let you go, thank you so much for coming on. Now, I know we've always been talking about the current Mavericks going into the playoffs, into this strange postseason format of who we don't even know who's actually going to be in it. I'll kind of end it off with more of a fun one. Now, you've been covering the Mavericks for about 5 years or even a little more. If you had to assemble your starting 5 roster for the Mavericks out of all 5 of those years to go into Orlando to compete, what roster would you go with? Now, you can use the player of that year. It doesn't have to be how they're playing right now, but it can be of that season's version of them.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think, if you're talking about just from the time that I've been covering them, I'll go with obviously Luka and KP from this year. I'll go from
that's a gimme, yeah.
And I think I'll have KP play center. I'll have my power forward be Dirk from the first year that I was covering them. I still think that's probably the best option there. And then from there it gets the other 2 spots. It's tough because I don't think the Mavs have just been kind of flooded with that talent. I think at one spot I would. And, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I think on one spot I would probably take Wesley Matthews for his defense. And then the other spot, I'll probably still take Seth Curry or Dorian Finney-Smith, depending on if I want my team to be more defensive-oriented or offensive-oriented, because, those guys are still guys that fit in well with Luka. And that's ultimately, that's all that matters is how do you fit in with Luka Doncic. And so, it kind of makes it easier to have those 2 years in between where there really was nobody on the roster to even, really choose from. But yeah, I think that's probably what my team would look like because it sets Luka up for success.
Yeah, definitely. If you can build the right team around Luka, it's game over. As we are Sacramento Kings fans, or excluding Brett, it was tough with the whole Luka Doncic, Marvin Bagley thing. It's a long story. We don't try to get into those flashbacks, as I may have actually been a bigger supporter of Bagley.
Bagley's better.
I don't want to talk about that. But, Mr. Yousuf, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Before we let you go, any other articles you're working on for the Athletic Dallas-Fort Worth?
Yeah, doing a few media articles that are kind of fun, big features to do for next week. But really, the big thing that I'm doing from a Mavericks standpoint is I started a series yesterday where every week from now until the season starts, I'm going to be doing film breakdowns and analysis of one player every week for the next 8 weeks. So of course it started with Luka Doncic yesterday, Kristaps Porzingis next week, and then we'll go on from there until the season starts to get fans ready and remind them of what the Mavericks team actually looked like almost 5 months ago when the season actually starts in July.
Well, I can't wait to start reading them as well as I got my Athletic subscription. Mr. Yousuf, I want to thank you just so much for coming on, man. We'd love to have you on again soon once the postseason does begin.
Yeah, anytime. Really good talking to you guys.
And that was Saad Yousuf for you guys. Now, I should have done a better job explaining this, as we're going to transition into the next interview with our special guest, Matt Brooks. Brett was unable to join us for this interview, as we got to keep making that money, get that dough. Brett's got work he had to go attend, so me and Tarik are going to do the interview together. Now, I did want to at least give a heads up. The first, I would say, from about 30 seconds to about a minute, there will be an echo. My audio quality will sound a lot worse. In the beginning, there was a little bit of an issue with the software we were using. Nonetheless, fixed it. Shout out to Tarik for telling me that there was an echo, because I didn't hear it because it was my mistake. But without further ado, Matt Brooks, SB Nation, Brooklyn Nets. Let's go.
And we are back. We got another special guest joining us today. We got to switch it up. We got one from the West Coast. We got to go out to the East Coast to the Brooklyn Nets. And who better than Matt Brooks, reporter who covers the Brooklyn Nets for the Nets Daily. Actually, this is a fun fact. The Nets Daily, as I'm a Sacramento Kings fan, Nets Daily is actually my most favorite SB Nation account to be following. And I've been following for a long time. I just want to get that out there. I'm not just trying to throw in my own bias there, but Mr. Brooks, how you doing today?
I'm good. It's funny to hear that you're a Kings fan. I went to school at University of the Pacific, so I watched a lot of Kings growing. I guess really during college. So that's funny to hear that. I always like to hear. I'm from California.
Yeah, all three of us are actually. We're from Sacramento. I recently moved out east, so a couple hours away from Brooklyn. But it's a rarity to see other Sacramento Kings fans or people who actually know that the Kings actually exist,
or even care.
Yeah, or care. Either one of them. But let's just kind of dive straight into what's going on throughout the NBA realm. Now, there's been a 3-month hiatus, and it sucked, I think, for all of us. I mean, especially when we're trying to do a podcast. I know, especially for you, when you're trying to making up articles and everything, it's tough to go over the same stuff for over 3 months in a row. Now, with the chance of the NBA season starting July 30th, there's some players that may not want to play, some that will. What are your thoughts about this going on in Orlando, and if this should actually happen, because a lot of players are now starting to say there's some backlash to it?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems like they were able to lock it down with the owners and probably the most wealthy, most famous players in the league, especially the ones that are going to be going for a title. And now you're kind of hearing like some of the other guys, whether it's like, role players or guys that are on teams that may not go as far, and they're kind of aware of that. It just seems like there's going to be this natural disconnect. Not everybody's going to be on the same page, but the important step, I think, was taken in that they were able to get the owners and the star players on the same page.
Yeah, and also when you look at the Brooklyn Nets heading into this final stretch, obviously we mentioned earlier in this podcast, but we'll say it again. There are a lot of I think your net income mentioned this on Nets Daily, which I agree. I think is fantastic. What you guys do on the SB Nation website is a lot of fun. But there are a lot of players out there that are currently that are free agents that can be signed, that can be added to teams to be used, especially if they expand rosters to 17 players, as we've been hearing for Orlando. Now, what players do you see being the most likely to be added to Brooklyn to help this stretch run?
I think there's one. I don't want to say it's a guarantee, but I'd be really surprised if Chris Chiozza doesn't get added to the roster.
Okay.
That was already going to be a big sticking point for them, as is. He was a two-way player, came on really strong, had this nice performance against Boston, really vital.
Yeah.
I know Karis LeVert was kind of the star of the show there, but just had a lot of pace and really moved the ball well in the way that really nobody on the roster did this year. So I don't want to say he's a guarantee, but he's damn near it. And then it'll be somebody else, NI was, or net income was all over it. So he tweeted out something about both the two-way players. It could be that option. Maybe we see Iman Shumpert again, although I doubt it.
Iman Shumpert, the king of the scores.
Yep.
We know all about him.
Oh, yes.
So, I don't know who that second one is. I'm not even sure if they would play that much. But I think that Chioza is the big one for me, and then from there it's kind of like whatever. It could be a just about anybody that they could throw out there.
Yeah, Alan Crabb's come up too.
I mean, Amon Trumper always has a special place in my heart for what he was able to do for the city of Sacramento, and only like 40 games played. And I saw throughout social media that everybody felt the same way when he was on the Nets, of like, he's just that grindy type player. He doesn't even really need to do much on the floor, but he's going to make an impact overall with the team, and especially with the locker room. Now, the Nets season per se hasn't been, I think, up to the expectations that many may have had him at. Now, we knew that Kevin Durant wasn't going to play. That was a given throughout the beginning. But to start off the year without Wilson Chandler for 25 games, Kyrie getting injured 11 games in, I mean, and so far for him this year, out of the 20 games, I mean, they're 8-12 when he's there. It's only 9 out of the 20 games he's actually had a positive impact on the game in the plus minus, which, give or take, could be the most underrated or most overrated stat in the game of basketball that we're looking at now. I mean, Kenny Atkinson gone. This season's been kind of a whirlwind. And now kind of going into more of Kenny Atkinson, how much of the blame really falls onto him, especially after such a successful season last year, and him being a defensive-minded coach, you're still 10th in defensive rating. How much of this blame throughout the season really goes on him, or is this more of just the injuries have just derailed everything?
I mean, I've been kind of in the camp of like, it seems like he's lost the locker room for a while now, really since I was at the game in Memphis where they lost, or the one against Memphis in Brooklyn, where they lost by 40. And it was weird. It took him like, because Kenny's the first one that comes out for the pressers. It took him, like 15, 20 minutes to come out? It should usually take like 5. So we were all sitting around like, where's this guy at? Like, what's going on? And it just seemed like that was an unusual situation. Then it comes out a couple of weeks later. I was actually in Toronto on vacation, and I get the update like everybody else that he's gone. I'm kind of in shock, but it just with more and more information coming out, it seemed like that he just lost the locker room. Guys were unsure of their roles. And then we had that thing that came out last week, and I'm actually forgetting who originally put this information out. I think this was Sean's, right? I believe, about the offense being an offense that was better retrofitted for D'Angelo Russell than Durant and Kyrie, which I don't really understand that, considering it's what they basically did was they ran everything through Russell and they ran everything through Dinwiddie. So I'm assuming that's probably what Kyrie and KD would want to do, is run a ton of pick and roll, maybe run sets that involve the two of them, or even just if those things break down, run like isolation and let those guys do what they do best. I'm confused by that personally. I have not seen an explanation for why that exactly makes sense. I thought it was a weird thing to come out last week, but I think it was the roles, the lack of clarity for certain guys that I would assume is why he's gone, unless it really is just they wanted their own guy in there.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want to say it's about the whole D'Angelo Russell thing, I think myself and Tarik could speak firsthand that we saw D'Angelo Russell go completely crazy in Kenny Atkinson's offense, and maybe in a particular game against Sacramento that we spent some good money to go watch.
Back to Sacramento, jeez.
There's too many ties today.
All Kings fans do, they just get depressed. I mean, Matt, I'm sorry to say, Matt, but it's so true. Our last playoff appearance happened when I think Theodore Roosevelt was president, and it's been a while.
Sure it wasn't Zachary Taylor?
Oh, that's right. It was General Zachary Taylor took office, and back then, they didn't have the trains. They took carriages to games. I left De'Aaron Fox on the horse. But I do have a question.
True.
I
do have to ask. Sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
No. I was gonna say I could do a whole podcast on the Iman Shumpert Kings era. Like that was what I think I wrote.
We will join you.
Like, yeah. I mean,
I'll write a tribute song.
A lot of Kings basketball, man.
We can all write our own tributes about it.
Iman, come back, Iman.
See, there's been petitions throughout the Sacramento region to bring him back, but I always go on about him forever off the camera, but off mic. But now, after the Kenny Atkinson issue, now Jacques Vaughn, he he was well known as an assistant in San Antonio, moved over to the Magic, maybe wasn't as successful as a stint there. What is he going to bring to change the dynamic of this Nets team? Like, what have you seen specifically maybe throughout his offensive sets? Does it cater better off to Kyrie, or is this just kind of a short-term gap for Kyrie to possibly get his guy and Tyronn Lue, as it's been reported that's who we would want?
I would probably lean toward the latter of the two. The biggest difference of anything that I saw, and like, again, we're looking at like a 3-game sample, so I don't really know if I can make any like declarative statements about how good of a coach Jacques Vaughn is. Offensively, they were pretty much just about the same. Spencer Dinwiddie took a few more mid-range shots, but I think that part of Kenny Atkinson was a little overdone, where he just wouldn't allow guys to shoot from the mid-range. I think Kyrie was taking 4 or 5 a game this year. So the defense thing was the biggest thing that I saw. They ran a little bit of switching D against the Lakers, kind of trapped pretty hard, tried to get the ball out of LeBron and AD's hands. But again, this is one game. Like, I don't know if that's gonna be the status quo with Jacques Vaughn as being this crazy game to game, malleable coach. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I think that more likely he's looking at this opportunity, and I do hope for his sake. I think he, more than just about anybody on the Nets roster, is the one that's going to come up from the ability to play in this Orlando tournament if it does happen. Because I think he's probably going to be coaching for another job. I've kind of stood by that since day one. He's been an assistant coach there. And I just, based on everything that it seems like where this team is going, it kind of feels like one of those, like late run Miami Heat teams where it's going to be a really kind of older, veteran laden team, the right guy in charge, maybe not an unproven coach in a way. And they're just going to sort of run with that. They're going to run with something that's a little bit more proven in a way. That would be my assumption, but I could be wrong. Again, he has the most to gain from this. If they do an incredible job, he looks like the next great coaching mind. And yeah, maybe this is a situation where, kind of like Tyronn Lue, he's the one who gets that job and is the unexpected face to take over.
Yeah, and if Connor, could I elaborate on that real quick? I wanted
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to elaborate on this topic for a second. So if it's not Vaughn and if it's not Lue, let's say we're fast forward to the beginning of next season, which is in 6 months apparently. Who do you see? Like, if you get out your crystal ball out there, your Brooklyn crystal ball, who do you see besides Lue or Vaughn as a really good fit for this Brooklyn Nets squad?
I mean, I think it would have to be somebody that's going to be from one of these playoff teams. That I mean, it's probably Lue. It could be like Phil Handy, although I think he would be an assistant coach more likely. That's the one that was floating around this week. So I don't know. I would say for them, they're probably going to make a really calculated decision in that they're going to wait to see. Now, again, this is all dependent upon if this tournament in Orlando happens. But if any coach does happen to lose his job, maybe a Mike D'Antoni from Houston, or
I was going to say D'Antoni,
yeah, like somebody like that. If that happens, then maybe they'll make that. They'll make a decision based off that. But right now, I don't think they're really in a rush right now. I guess Lue is still the favorite right now. It's one of those things where he's been around so much that I almost have a little bit of attrition from it. But the reasoning behind hiring him still probably makes the most sense. If him and Kyrie are as close as people say, which tends to vary from report to report.
Yeah, so you think that you think that Kyrie and KD are going to have a big part in this hiring process? Like you think they're going to go with a candidate that's not going to go against like their liking? Would you agree with that?
I definitely do now after the report that came out last week from Sham about the offense. Yeah, I think it's going to be heavily made by those guys. Personally.
Yeah, I'm curious to see as well, because I think D'Antoni would be phenomenal for Kyrie and KD. Just go run. The fast break offenses with DeAndre Jordan, and you also got Jared Allen running across the wings. All the opportunity for Joe Harris to stretch out the floor. I think it would be so much fun to watch. It'd definitely be an interesting fit, as you'd have to move a couple extra pieces around that maybe aren't as ball dominant. There's a lot of question marks up in the air as of what his job security really is, but who knows about that? Now, kind of going into this Orlando tournament, players have been given a long time to take a break. And while for the Nets, that could hurt some players like Karis LeVert, who's been going crazy like the last 10 games. I think it was averaging 27 a game. Dinwiddie was doing his thing out there. The Nets seemed as if they started to get onto a roll. They ended off on a 3-game winning streak. Going in, is there anybody that you're kind of expecting with this break is going to shine out there, maybe help the Nets become more of a sleeper team throughout the playoffs, or anybody come to mind?
Unfortunately, I'm still snoozing on the Nets a little bit, even though I'm covering them. I don't know. I mean, it kind of depends who they play, but I don't even think people in Brooklyn here, they're kind of looking at next year already, looking at the calendar.
Really?
I guess you could say, I don't think it's like an overwhelming sense of like the Nets are they might win a game or two in the playoffs, but I would not say that they have the ability to. I mean, just again, those top 2 seeds, Toronto and Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Toronto's such a tough get for them. That's just such a well-oiled machine. And a tough get, really a tough go for Vaughn, who is going to be coaching for a big job either in Brooklyn or somewhere else. So I would probably say, the top 3 guys, if I was to try to prophesize about this a little bit, Karis is the name that comes to mind. Although I could actually see Dinwiddie really kind of revving things up again with a little bit of time off. Just felt like they kind of ran him into the ground a little bit, just with the amount of usage and just how tough they played everything through him for the first couple of months. So I would say Karis. Chioza, who I've already mentioned once, I think he could be a big winner, potentially earn himself a real guaranteed spot on next year's roster and allow them to reconfigure the roster the way they want to, with either a second or third point guard on the roster in him. And then Vaughn, again, I think those are the 3 guys that could win from this the most. I don't think they're going to make a ton of noise in the playoffs per se, but I do think it'll help them iron out certain decisions as to who is going to fit around Kyrie and KD.
Do you really think they're going to win one game in a series with the Raptors or Bucks? And I do not mean to sound like a really mean person. As a Kings fan, I've always wondered what the playoffs are like, and I feel like I'm, do you really think we're going to wear that? But like, do you honestly see this series going like 6 or 7 games, like down the stretch?
No, I think at best they're going to win 1 or 2. I mean, it could be like the situation last year where you have the Magic beating the Raptors in Game 1 because of DJ Augustine going ballistic out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the situation, but I don't know.
Stranger things have happened.
Winning 2 games.
Exactly. Stranger things have always happened. And now, before I let you go, Mr. Brooks, thank you so much for coming on now. I saw recently in a tweet that you were talking about you're basically, if you built up a lineup of your top 5 players, I commented back on it. If you had to build up your starting 5 of it all throughout the Brooklyn Nets of your favorite guys out there, who would you be going with? Now I saw Theo Pinson, if I'm not mistaken. I rebutted with, why don't you do all 5 Quincy Aces, as we can agree on some common ground about him.
Connor,
are you kidding me?
Don't even joke.
No, I'm
about
not.
That. Oh my gosh!
If you're gonna be going with your starting 5 throughout this, who are you running with? And if you wanted to put them into the Orlando tournament as well, you could replace the Nets team and put them with this starting 5.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. This is Billy Reinhardt's tweet, who is my teammate and colleague at Nets Daily. He did this big thing. I just said 5 Travion Graham. Because
Graham.
Yeah.
I was trying to pull up the tweet. I'm scrolling and I'm like, what is it? What's the name again?
I wrote an article last year when I was working at a company called Elite Sports New York, and it was like this big thing about how Travion Graham is this glue guy for them. And I got dunked on, man. Like, I've gotten dunked on for certain articles before, but I got dunked on. Everybody's like, why do you have this guy who is like probably not going to be on the roster next year? This is like summer. Summer NBA is always a funny time because you're scratching for stories here and there. But yeah, that was I've kind of leaned into that. That's become my my meme in a sense. No, I mean, I think honestly an actual starting 5, if I'm going to give you it, you have to have Kyrie, KD. I need to think about how he made this tweet. I'm assuming it's in the Brooklyn era, so you'd want Brook Lopez. Shooting guard, I guess you'd want Joe Johnson, and then I need a small forward. Let's go Travion Graham. Perfect. We'll get him in there.
I was going to ask, why not Troy Murphy? The Nets great when they went to Brooklyn.
What about KG? What about KG?
Yeah. Oh yeah, old KG. So I grew up watching I've watched a lot of really bad teams, if you can't tell. I grew up watching the Timberwolves a lot. My dad's from Minnesota. So that's I watching Brooklyn KG versus the KG I saw growing up.
Same thing.
Very different
story. Same thing. I mean, they both wear Garnett. I mean, it's the same player, pretty much.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much the same.
I mean, it's close enough. But Mr. Brooks, exactly. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Before I let you go, is there any other articles you're working on right now for SB Nation that's coming out soon?
No, I need to get back on it. That's a great reminder.
We're here for you.
I'm going to be getting back to it. I do a lot of film study stuff. We're kind of in this weird like layover period where I'm not sure if I should start writing playoff articles yet or kind of approach it as like the season is done. But I'll be getting back on it the next couple of days. So yeah, you can find me at Matt Brooks NBA on Twitter, and I'm creating stuff for the most part all the time.
You heard it here, folks. You better be following him. Yep. I better see that follow number go right up after this podcast is up. Mr. Brooks, it's been a pleasure having you on. I'd love to have you come back on once the playoffs start.
Yeah, let's hope we get there, man.
Let's hope for the best here. And that was Matt Brooks for you, and also Saad Yousuf, two amazing guests coming on today. It's a special podcast for us. Normally we don't do multiple guests, but you know what? I wanted to give you guys a special treat. I felt it was a special day.
Connor, you're a saint.
To give back. I know, Tarik. Thank you.
I know,
I
and
my best.
You're so selfless as well.
I'm just so humble about it. There was a movie called Rockstar where the host was named Connor, and I took a couple of pieces from the Connor Humbleness Handbook, and I implemented it for today. But guys, I hope you guys did enjoy today's podcast. Check out all of our latest articles. Calvin just came up with his latest NHL one. You guys got to check out 3brosports.com. It's a totally revamped page. Tarik's working on his own article right now. I'm working on mine. I know Garrett Roth, you haven't heard of him much, but you will be soon because he's coming out with a really interesting one I know you guys would love to check out about the oldest baseball pool in America. Now, this is before fantasy baseball was around where you had to
wait, so you take a dive in the pool, or like, is that how it works?
Sadly not. I wish it was, but it's not that simplistic.
Oh, it's the other kind of pool. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting it, Tarik.
I'm getting it.
Anyways, guys, hope you guys did enjoy it. We'll see you guys next week. I'm Connor.
I'm Tarik.
Have a good one. 3 Bro Sports would like to thank Anchor FM for sponsoring this podcast and Benjamin Tissot on bensound.com for the amazing intro, outro music.
Shut up and sit down.